We'll hand it over to Chris. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, good afternoon, everybody. So again, my name is Chris Horner. I am a cybersecurity engineer with Triaxiom Security, which is a consultancy based in Charlotte, North Carolina. So as a pen tester, part of my job is running social engineering exercises. And to be successful at that, I have to look for information that will make my communication attempts with people appear more authentic, and they could also be used to create attack vectors. Now, the thing is, these are the exact same methods that a bad actor is going to use to gain personal information on their targets as well. So it's important to be aware of how this occurs so we can protect ourselves and our loved ones. So today we're going to talk about 4 different things. We're going to talk about OSINT, what it is. We're going to look at what people can see about us online, how do people find this out, and then most importantly, how to take back a measure of control on that. So this presentation, despite the introduction I just got, is not meant to not meant to scare anybody. I don't think scare tactics work, but I do believe in awareness. And with awareness, we can all make calculated decisions then on what we want to allow to be disclosed about us and how that can affect our lives. So think of it as like our own personal risk model, if you will. So first, a definition of OSINT. For those that don't know, OSINT simply stands for open source intelligence. What this means is publicly available information that anybody can look up. No hacking is required to access it. When somebody is doing something like this, they collect these bits of information piece by piece, and they piece them together from multiple sites to get the information that they're ultimately after, and then that also helps them craft more specific searches. So if you kind of think of it like a jigsaw puzzle, you have a jigsaw puzzle, you got the pieces all spread out all over the place, right? One piece by itself isn't going to mean a whole lot. But the more of these pieces you start to put together, the clearer the picture becomes. Eventually, you have the complete picture. And so that's essentially what this process is. So how are people finding out this information? It literally just starts with a web browser. From there, it probably leads to somebody's social media profiles and posts. Everybody likes talking about their interest, right? But if you kind of look back at the conversations that are online and on a lot of these social media sites, do those things start to give hints to things like passwords, for example? Or do you have a really cute and unique username that you think is awesome, like this is me, this is my handle, this is where I am everywhere on the internet? That's fine. Just understand that can also make it easier to pinpoint you as well. We're all cyber enthusiasts here, so we probably know 90% of the internet is on the deep web. Deep web, of course, being different than dark web. Deep web just means that that is the information that is on the internet but is not accessed or indexed by search engines. But that does not mean that information is not available when you know where to look. So some examples of that would be like the Wayback Machine or even public records databases. One of my favorite examples of this is county and state tax records. If you know approximately where somebody lives, and depending on the locale, you could be able to find their property tax records for their home or their car. And recorded documents sometimes get added to that, such as mortgage deeds, license plates, type of car, mortgage information, how much their mortgage was, how much they're paying each month, things like that. That information will vary, again, depending on where you are, but a lot of people are surprised to see that that can actually be accessed by anyone. Other information that people can get, addresses, both current and previous, phone numbers, email addresses, even the AOL one you had 25 years ago and forgot about, all the different social media profiles, dates of birth, maiden names, relatives, neighbors, political affiliation, online reviews. Now, online reviews is a really interesting one because sometimes people like to review every place they've ever been, and Yelp, whatever. That's fine, but that also starts to give insight into the types of places that you like to go. So that, again, can be used in social engineering attacks. It could also give insight into other interests that you have. Say, for example, you like expensive and rare wristwatches. So you're on one of the Rolex forums, for example, and you're talking about, oh, I have this particular watch. It's a very rare one or a very valuable one. It could give the wrong person some ideas. You take that kind of information, combine it with what we just talked about, and you can kind of start to see where problems can arise on that. Now, this actually even applies to business information. So on a pen test one time, I had a repeat client. They wanted something different. And I was actually able to figure out the kind of HR software that their company was using. The way that I was able to figure that out is I was researching our client's logo, and I found one that linked back to this HR software company's website. The reason it did was because our client had put a testimonial out there talking about how happy they were with the HR website. Or their software. That becomes a phishing campaign for me. So I created a portal that mimicked the HR software company website, sent out a phishing email that said, hey, it's previously announced, we're going to have these upgrades. There was no previous announcement. We need everybody to log in by the end of the week because we don't want your payroll messed up, right? And it worked. So when I made this presentation, I picked on some poor unfortunate soul that shares the same name with me. And this is an example of things I was able to find out about this person. Phone number, email, addresses, previous relatives, neighbors, social media, even how long he'd lived in his house, what the median home value was, his income, and aliases that he used. So the reason I did this is one of the very first versions I gave of this presentation. I figured it was always good to show, not tell, right? But here's the thing. All this information that I collected, I did this in less than 10 minutes while I was watching a Formula One race on my other monitor. It literally took me longer to redact this information and to put it in slides than it did to uncover it in the first place. So here's why this matters. If you've ever had to answer password reset questions, or prove who you are to a credit bureau especially, they're going to ask about mortgage information, payment and loan information, and things like that. So if you think about those things that we're asked to validate who we are on a daily basis, with information that's out there, again, you kind of start to see the problem. Sometimes people have to deal with stalkers. I don't mean this to sound sexist, but this does disproportionately affect women. This is also the part of the presentation where I'd like to give a public service announcement, because I have teenage daughters that I care for very well. And anybody who thinks about dating them, I hope they come across this presentation and remember me and who I am, because I'm that dad. It's not just women, though, that deal with stalkers. I had this at one point, and in my case, it was more annoying than anything else and eventually went away. But, I mean, a lot of times that can become a very serious situation very quickly. Then there's bad actors tend to go for easy targets, right? So the more information that's out there about somebody, the easier time that they have. And then there's, did we agree to let these sites aggregate our information? And, well, we did, but we'll talk about that a little later. But if we had known our information was going to be out there and used like this, a lot of us might have made different decisions on this. So an example of how this can be used, again, on a social engineering engagement, we had a client that they had a very specific request. They wanted something, they wanted a very specific task accomplished to see if we could do it. And I was supposed to call a certain department within this company and try to get something done. So I didn't have that department's phone number. I was able to find the phone number for a different department, called up and said, hey, I'm new here, I need to get this done, who do I call? And I was just, oh yeah, number's 888, blah, 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 cool, thanks. Called that department, tried to get the task done, but figured out I needed the date of birth and the last four of the SOCH for one of the employees in order to get this done. I'm like, well, okay. So what I started doing is I started going through, I picked an employee who had a very unique name. It was an Eastern European name, figured out what metro market that he lived in, started going through social media profiles, looking for happy birthday messages. But his social media profiles, they were very light. There wasn't a whole lot there. So, using the same stuff, I went back through, I pieced 2 different pieces of information together and actually got the date of birth. So then I called him directly, phishing campaign. And because I had this company internal department phone number, spoofed that phone number to call him, so it looked like it was coming from within the company. Said, hey, guess what? We had some database transfers. Not all the information got transferred correctly. So you know how you call us and we have to verify your date of birth and the last 4 of your social? Oh, yeah. I said, let me just make sure we have this information right, because we had this happen with somebody else where it didn't transfer correctly. I've got your date of birth as blah, 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 blah. Yep, that's right. All right, cool. Got your last 4 of your social, 7896, numbers I made up. Oh, no, that's not right. Then the million-dollar question, that's what the problem is. What should it be? Called the department back and got it done. I don't think the company was amused. But that's how this can happen. An attitude I hear frequently about this is, so what? If somebody wants to know all this about me, it says more about them than it does about me. And maybe. This was shared with me at one point. This is a clip from a movie called Anon. And it's where the world is a super surveillance state. Everything is recorded, everything is accessible, so crime can't really happen because you can just go back in time, see different things from everybody's point of view. And Amanda Seyfried's character here, she's actually figured out how to get around the system, erase these memories, and also not be recorded while still living in plain sight. Clive Owen plays opposite her as a cop, and he asked her flat out, why it's so important to stay invisible? And this was her answer, and I always thought this was interesting. It's not that I have anything to hide. I have nothing I want you to see. And isn't that kind of the point? So it doesn't mean we have to live like a prepper or recluse, unless you want to. But it's just being aware of what's out there about us and how it can be used. So before we talk about how to take back some control over it, let's talk a little bit about how we got here, because we have to understand that. There's an old saying, I'm sure we've all heard it, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. And in a lot of cases, that's what's happened. Rewards programs we signed up for, things we talk about on our social media profiles, social media games we play, mailing lists we belong to, background data from our mobile apps, web browsing history, credit card transactions, online surveys we filled out, public records we've looked at, services we use. Now this one can be a little more subtle. One example of this is the telehealth industry. So this industry exploded during the COVID crisis. And it's still in use a lot today, and why wouldn't it be? I mean, it made it convenient. We're all busy. Who has time to go to the doctor? If it's something minor, we can just get it done. But a study was done for some of the top 50 telehealth websites. It was found that 49 of them were sending some level of data to marketing companies or social media companies, or both. A lot of times the expectation is if we're dealing with something in the medical field, it's going to be covered by HIPAA, and it's going to be private, and nobody else is going to know it. And that's true when you're talking to your medical provider, but they're not medical providers. What was found was 49 of the 50 were sending some level of information, but 13 of them were actually answers to questionnaires that the people were filling out when they were trying to get help. Now, some of these were very sensitive topics. Somebody was feeling suicidal. They were feeling depression. Nobody wants to admit that. That's a hard thing to admit. So they were, anonymously trying to, get some help with this. Alcohol or drug addiction. Things like that, we're actually going to these tech companies for marketing purposes. And that's not cool. And if you read, I put the link in here, but if you read the rest of the article, there's a lot of back and forth. Some of the telehealth companies said, well, we've changed our practices. We don't do that anymore. Oh my gosh, okay, well, we're going to change, and probably because I got caught. Then some of them said, well, we didn't really fully understand the tools, capabilities, what we're using, which is the worst excuse of all. And then you have the tech companies on the other side saying, well, that's not really the purpose of these tools. It's to collect this information, and we discourage that, yet the default settings run them wide open. And sometimes they said, well, we can filter out sensitive answers like that, but yeah, it may not always be accurate. The point is, how do we know? when we're using things for convenience, or we're using anything really, how do we really know how our data is being used? As consumers, the burden is left on us to figure it out, not to mention deal with the fallout and the cleanup when the inevitable breach happens. So all of this information is collected together. It's sliced and diced up about 87,000 ways. It's sold off to the highest bidder over and over and over and over and over and over again. And the unfortunate thing is, we kind of did it to ourselves. We voluntarily gave a lot of this information up because we don't read terms of services agreements. I don't. I should know better, and I don't. I don't think hardly anybody does. Not fully. But we did this because, it sounded good to save 40 cents on a loaf of bread that day. And the thing is, all of this data collection is legal. Ethical is a different discussion, but it's all legal. And if you want to do a deep dive on how exactly this process works and how data brokers work, John Oliver, about a year ago, he did a very good deep dive on this subject. It's about 20 minutes long. You can find it on YouTube. It's very informative. He explains it very well. Like my friend says, he breaks it down into crayon so everybody can understand it and how it works. And at the end, he does something really funny with it. That's in true John Oliver style. I encourage checking it out. So, okay, that's the problem now, so how do we get rid of it? Well, first step, Google yourself, see what's coming up, and see what sites it's coming up on. A lot of these data broker sites will actually have an opt-out page. Surprisingly, it works. But they don't make this page easy to find at all, because remember, you're messing with their money. So sometimes you have to Google the name of the site and opt-out page. That's an easier way to find it. They may require a reason. They may want a reason for why do you want your information removed from our database? Examples of reasons that work. You work in law enforcement. You're afraid of retaliation. You have had problems with stalking or harassment. When I went through and did this process myself, I used the stalking and harassment or identity theft excuses. I was never asked to prove it. Not to say that you won't, but if you have any qualms about stretching the truth in case none of those situations apply to you, just remember Equifax lost control of all of our data, so we're all potential victims of identity theft at that point. So thanks, Equifax. This is a very tedious process and requires a lot of vigilance to do. And even after you do it, I always recommend checking a few times a year. Reason being, other data brokers pop up that you may not have heard about. They don't have that agreement not to track your information. Something could have been reactivated and something else that you agreed to along the way. Who knows? Once you get it done, just check on it a few times a year just to make sure that everything is still clear. And then actually look at the permissions and stuff that you're enabling on apps that you're using, especially on your phone. Does that game really need to know that much about you, especially when it comes to location services? Just kind of take a minute and think about how you're using that particular app and if it really needs as many permissions as it's asking for. A lot of times it won't. Finally, consider using a privacy-based browser to limit tracking. Example of this, Firefox or Brave. There's others, I understand, or at least installing some privacy-focused extensions on the one that you're using. Now, here's the fun part. So now that you know that this happens, why not put some misinformation out there and just screw with the whole algorithm? The reward program you're signing up for, does it really need to know your date of birth? I like to use April Fool's Day, or August 29th, 1997. If you know why the August one is funny, find me around tonight. I'll be here at the party. Give me a high five. It means you're as nerdy as I am. Do they really need your actual phone number? Are they really going to check it? I've got another associate who just makes up any area code, 2675309. Again, another reference showing my age. But put that kind of stuff out there. So personally, I adjust my birth year in both directions, sometimes by a magnitude of decades. And I know it's working, because you know what I get ads in the mail for? AARP. I know I look old, but I'm not that old. Now, come on. But that's from screwing around with things. Now, if I find something wrong out there, I leave it out there because it's funny. So does this work? Yeah, it works. Here's how I know. After I'd gone through and done this, there was some friends of mine. They were trying to throw a surprise anniversary party for some mutual friends. I didn't know this particular individual. She knew of me, but didn't know me. Our mutual friends, it was their 25th wedding anniversary coming up. She spent months looking up all the Chris Horners in North Carolina trying to find me. and couldn't. Finally had to break down and ask a couple, how do I get a hold of this guy? And it kind of ruined the surprise party for him. But it can be done. Now, none of this is going to get you away from government or law enforcement, stuff like that. I don't encourage or condone that. But if you want some level of anonymity and privacy, it definitely does work. Now, if you want to go deeper in the rabbit hole, everything we talked about here just kind of scratches the surface of this topic, so I'm going to show you some other resources that are helpful. Standard disclaimer, when I give this presentation, either myself or Kakalakicon or Triaxiom Security, none of us care if you use these resources or not. These are just simple things that I have found to be helpful and in all cases are free. So first up is Heath Adams at TCM Security, probably a familiar name to us. He put his entire course, 4.5-hour course on OSINT, online for free on YouTube. It's excellent, it's very easy to understand, and he shows how this works. And then every once in a while he releases another video on OSINT and how things are tracked, and it's really good to understand that. And every once in a while some of them actually have a challenge, so you can kind of see how good you are yourself at it, which is neat. Michael Bizel, he runs a website called inteltechniques.com. Now this dude, he treats this topic like blood sport. He is very thorough, very good. His book, Extreme Privacy, again, not an endorsement, but I'm saying it has some helpful information. Nobody benefits if you choose to get it or not, of course. But part of the resources that he has on his website is a checklist of all these data brokers that you can kind of go through yourself, a lot of which you've never even heard of, and see if your information is on there, and then the link as well to how to opt out of it. His book, he gets really deep into how to disappear but still enjoy a normal life. He also covers really advanced topics, again, if you really want to go deep, about burner phones, prepaid cards, hiding real estate ownership from prying eyes, like what we showed earlier, not tax people, of course, but his clients that he offers this service for tend to be extremely high profile, high celebrity clients. And this is basically the playbook he uses to set those individuals up. He's even got a supplementary one out now about creating a private mobile device and how to set that up with a mobile phone. One of the first versions I gave of this talk, somebody had pointed me in the direction of this service, Delete Me. Now this is a paid service. Again, I stress there is no affiliation here, but the individual I spoke with seemed very happy with it. The reason I chose to include them here is at the top of their website, I've got in the red box a do-it-yourself opt-out guide. They'll show you exactly what to do to go through and opt out of that. So for that reason, I've chosen to include them here. Now, if you really get into this and you don't want to be branded a stalker, but you want to kind of see how, if you're good at it or you enjoy it or you think this is pretty cool and you want to do some good for the community, tracelabs.org. What they do, they crowdsource OSINT information, people doing exactly what we're talking about here, but this is to reunite missing people with their loved ones. So that's pretty cool. You can do it for a good cause without wearing orange in jail. And that's what I have. Well, most of us are already interested in maintaining security and privacy. A lot of individuals in our circles, they don't even understand all the stuff that's going on. And as security professionals, it's up to us. We're known as the experts in our respective circles on this topic. And I'm always the first to say it takes a village. So, if we're looking out for each other and our loved ones, all of us can help stay safe. I'm always happy to connect to other professionals. I'm on LinkedIn under Chris M. Horner. My conversation on there tends to revolve around OSINT, cybersecurity, and sports cars I can't afford. So anyway, hope to meet more of you at the conference tonight, and enjoy the rest of everything. Thank you.